Have you ever had one of those moments that start out so ordinary, so simple, that you could never imagine how it would change you, even just a little? That's what happened to me that afternoon. But before I tell you what really happened in that laundry room, let me just say, I love seeing where everyone's watching from. So if you're listening right now, drop your city in the comments below. It always amazes me to see folks from Texas, Florida, even all the way from Oregon tuning in. And if you enjoy stories like this, stories about the unexpected corners of life, make sure you subscribe and give this video a little thumbs up. It means more than you know. Anyway, let me take you back. It was a quiet Thursday, the kind where the air sits still and the light comes through the curtains just right, soft, yellow, like the world's taking a breath before the weekend. I was in the laundry room, folding towels, humming to myself, thinking about dinner. My son Daniel had brought a few friends over, some of his old college buddies back in town for a visit. The house had that familiar sound again, laughter, footsteps, the low rumble of young voices that used to fill it years ago. It made me smile. I didn't mind doing the chores when the house felt alive. The laundry room sits off the kitchen, small but bright, with white walls and the faint scent of detergent in the air. I had just pulled out a worn pile of clothes when the door creaked open behind me. I turned, expecting Daniel, but it wasn't him. It was Mark, his friend from high school. I hadn't seen him in years. Back then, he was the quiet one, polite, always helping with dishes after dinner, always asking how I was doing. Now, he looked different, older, broader, but there was still that gentle kindness in his eyes that hadn't changed a bit. "Oh, I'm sorry, Mrs. Carter," he said, stepping back quickly. "I didn't mean to just barge in. I thought this was the pantry." I laughed softly, waving off his embarrassment. "It's all right, Mark. You're fine. You can still get lost in this old house. I do too sometimes." He chuckled, rubbing the back of his neck. There was a small silence, the kind that isn't awkward, just thoughtful. I noticed the way he looked around, almost nostalgic. "This place hasn't changed much," he said. "No," I replied, folding another towel. "Maybe I haven't either." He smiled. "You have, Mrs. Carter, but in a good way. You seem lighter." That made me pause. Lighter. I hadn't thought of myself like that in a long time. Most days I felt weighed down by the quiet, by the empty rooms, by the routines that filled the space Daniel once filled. "You always were good with words," I said, half teasing. He shrugged, grinning a little. "I guess I just meant, you look happy. It's nice to see." That simple remark did something, not in any inappropriate way, but in a deeply human way. It reminded me that sometimes people still notice you, even after years of being the one doing the noticing. We talked a bit more about where he'd been, his new job in Seattle, the things Daniel and his friends used to get into back then. I found myself genuinely enjoying the conversation. The laundry sat half-folded as we stood there, two people from different corners of the same story, catching up like no time had passed. "You know," he said after a while, "Daniel always used to talk about how strong you were, how no matter what happened, you kept things together." I felt a lump rise in my throat. He said that all the time. There was a quiet warmth in his voice that filled the room. It wasn't romantic. It was recognition, the kind that comes when someone sees a part of you that others overlook. "Thank you, Mark," I said finally. "That's kind of you to say." He smiled again, and for a moment we both just stood there, surrounded by the hum of the dryer, the faint rustle of fabric, and the comfortable understanding that sometimes life gives you unexpected moments of connection. Then Daniel's voice called from the kitchen, breaking the spell. "Mom, you seen Mark?" Mark grinned, stepping toward the door. "Guess that's my cue." As he left, he glanced back once more, eyes kind. "It was good seeing you, Mrs. Carter." "You too, Mark," I said softly. When the door shut, I stood there for a while, staring at the half-folded laundry. The house felt still again, but not in the same way. Something about that brief encounter, that honest human moment, had stirred something inside me. Not longing, not regret, just awareness. That sometimes the people who walk unexpectedly into your day can remind you of the parts of yourself you've quietly set aside. And as I picked up another towel, I realized that small moment in the laundry room was the beginning of something I didn't see coming. Not love, not romance, but maybe rediscovery. I couldn't stop thinking about that brief conversation for the rest of the day. Not in any dramatic way. It just kept echoing quietly in the back of my mind. The house was busy that evening. Daniel and his friends stayed for dinner. I cooked a simple meal: roasted chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans, the kind of dinner I'd made hundreds of times before. But the energy around the table felt different this time. The laughter, the teasing, the old inside jokes. It was like stepping back into a familiar rhythm I hadn't heard in years. Mark sat across from me. Every now and then our eyes met, just brief, passing glances, but there was something behind them, something calm and grounding. Not attraction, not even curiosity, but recognition. A quiet acknowledgement that we'd shared a small, honest moment earlier that day. After dinner, the boys moved into the living room, watching some old basketball game on TV. I stood at the sink, rinsing dishes, listening to their voices fade into the background. The water was warm on my hands, the clinking of plates almost meditative. When the last of the dishes was done, I turned off the faucet and just stood there for a moment, listening. That's when I heard footsteps behind me again. "Need a hand?" It was Mark's voice. I turned, smiling. "You already helped by eating all that food." He chuckled. "Daniel said I should thank you for dinner. So, thank you. It was really good, like I remembered." I laughed softly. "You remembered my cooking." "Are you kidding? I still think about those Sunday breakfasts you used to make when we'd all stay over after games. You'd be up before everyone else, flipping pancakes and humming to yourself." The memory made me smile. I hadn't thought about those mornings in years. The chaos of boys running through the house, the smell of syrup and coffee, the feeling of being needed. Back then, I was always in motion, always doing, never really stopping. "You have a good memory," I said. "I guess some things stick," he replied, leaning casually against the counter. There was an ease between us, natural, unforced. The kind of ease that comes when two people meet again after years apart and realize that time didn't erase familiarity. It just softened it. We talked for a while longer. About how life had changed, how the world seemed faster now, louder, and somehow lonelier too. "You ever get tired of it?" he asked suddenly. "Tired of what?" "The quiet, the routines." That question lingered. I looked down, drying my hands with a towel, choosing my words carefully. "Sometimes," I admitted, "I used to think peace was all I wanted. Now, I think I just want to feel something new, even if it's small." He nodded slowly. "Yeah, I get that." It surprised me how easily I could speak like that with him. Maybe because there was no expectation, no history of conflict or misunderstanding. Just honesty. And honesty, I realized, can be its own kind of closeness. Later, when everyone had left, I walked through the now quiet house. The laughter and footsteps were gone, replaced again by the soft hum of the refrigerator, the ticking of the clock. I paused at the laundry room door. The same folded towels still sat there from earlier. I smiled, touching the edge of one, remembering the conversation that had started it all. The next morning, I found a note on the counter. It was from Mark. "Thank you for the meal and the talk. You reminded me that home isn't always a place. Sometimes it's a person who listens. It was simple, almost casual. But something in those words reached deeper than it should have. Not because it was romantic, but because it was true. We all want to be seen, really seen, even just for a moment. And that's what had happened. Days passed. Daniel went back to his job. The house fell into its familiar rhythm again, and life went on. But something inside me had shifted quietly. I started noticing things I hadn't before. The way the morning light touched the windowsill, the smell of rain on the garden path, the faint hum of the washer as it spun. Life wasn't louder, but I was listening closer. Then one afternoon, a week later, I got a message on my phone. It was from Daniel. "Mom, Mark's in town again next weekend. He asked if he could drop something by for you. Said he forgot something at the house." I didn't remember him leaving anything behind, but somehow I knew. Maybe it wasn't about what he'd forgotten. When Saturday came, I found myself tidying up the house, not because I expected company, but because it felt good to care again. To prepare for something, even something uncertain. The air was cool, the kind that carries the scent of early autumn. I put on a soft sweater, brewed tea, and sat by the window. And when I heard the familiar sound of tires on the gravel driveway, I didn't feel nervous. Just aware. Aware that life, even at 58, still had surprises left. That maybe. The laundry room wasn't the end of that story at all, just the beginning of a quiet rediscovery neither of us expected. When I opened the door that Saturday afternoon, Mark stood there, holding a small paper bag and wearing that same easy smile. The autumn breeze carried the faint scent of leaves and damp soil from the garden. "Hey, Mrs. Carter," he said, voice calm and kind. "Hope I'm not interrupting anything." "Not at all," I replied, motioning for him to come in. "You're just in time for tea." He stepped inside, wiping his shoes on the mat like he used to years ago. The paper bag rustled as he set it down on the counter. "I brought you something," he said. Inside was a small, old photograph, one of those faded prints from a disposable camera. It showed Daniel and his friends standing in the backyard after one of their games, muddy and laughing. Behind them, there I was, blurry in mid-laugh, waving from the porch. "You gave me this picture years ago," he explained. "I found it tucked in one of my old books. Thought you might want it back." I looked at the photograph for a long moment. My hair was darker then, my smile brighter. There was a life in that picture. Noisy, messy, beautiful. I hadn't realized how much I missed that version of myself until that very second. "Thank you," I said softly. "I didn't even know this photo still existed." He shrugged lightly. "It just felt right to bring it to you. I don't know why." We sat in the kitchen, the afternoon light slanting across the table. I poured us tea, the sound of it filling the quiet space between us. It wasn't awkward. It was comforting, like the calm after a familiar song. "So how have you really been?" he asked after a while. I hesitated. People rarely asked that question with real intention. Honestly, I've been fine, but maybe too fine, if that makes sense. He nodded. "Yeah, like life gets smaller when you stop noticing the details." Exactly that. I leaned back, watching the steam rise from my cup. When Daniel moved out, I thought I'd enjoy the quiet, but I didn't realize how much I'd filled my days with taking care of other people. Once it was just me, I didn't know what to do with all the silence. He listened, really listened, not just waiting for his turn to speak. There was a patience about him that made it easy to be honest. "I think we all lose pieces of ourselves when we spend too long holding everything together," he said after a pause. "But sometimes those pieces aren't gone. They're just waiting for a reason to show up again." His words hung there between us. I could feel the truth in them. I smiled faintly. You sound like you've been through something similar. He looked down at his hands. Maybe. My parents divorced a few years ago. I took care of my mom for a while. She's better now, but I guess I forgot how to take care of myself in the process. There it was again, that quiet understanding. Two people who had spent years keeping things together for everyone else, now sitting in a kitchen, realizing they'd both forgotten how to simply be. Outside, the wind stirred the branches of the old maple tree. A few leaves drifted past the window, catching the sunlight as they fell. I planted that tree with Daniel when he was 10, I said absently. He said he wanted something that would grow with him. Mark followed my gaze. Looks like it did. For a moment, the air felt heavy with meaning. Not romantic, something deeper than that. A sense of time, of things passing, of being part of a story that keeps unfolding whether we notice or not. We sat like that for a while. 2 cups of tea cooling slowly between us, 2 lives quietly intersecting in a way neither expected. Eventually he stood. I should probably get going. I told Daniel I'd meet him later. I nodded, walking him to the door. As he reached for the handle, he paused. Mrs. Carter, thank you for listening, for being you, I guess. That made me smile. You don't have to thank me for that, Mark, but it's nice to be seen. He hesitated, then smiled back. You always were. And with that, he was gone, walking down the garden path, sunlight glinting off the leaves. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, thinking about the photo he'd returned. I placed it on my nightstand earlier, and the soft glow from the lamp caught the edges of it now. I looked at my younger self in that picture, mid-laugh, surrounded by noise and movement. She looked so alive, and for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel sad looking at her. I felt curious. Curious about who she had become. Maybe that's what connection does, even brief, unexpected connection. It wakes up the quiet parts of you, the ones that have been sleeping through your days. When morning came, I brewed coffee and opened the kitchen window. The air was crisp, cool, filled with the scent of the maple tree outside. The house didn't feel so empty anymore. It felt awake. And somewhere deep down, I knew this wasn't the end of our story. Not his and mine, but mine and life's. The part of me that had been waiting quietly in the background had finally begun to stir. The following week came and went quietly. Daniel called a few times, checking in, telling me about work and how life was speeding by faster than he could keep up. I listened, smiling, giving advice here and there, but mostly just proud to hear his voice. After we hung up, the house fell back into its usual rhythm, still, gentle, almost meditative. Except this time, it didn't feel lonely. Something had shifted in me since Mark's visit. I caught myself noticing the small things again, the way sunlight touched the curtains in the morning, the faint hum of the kettle, the scent of laundry soap that lingered in the air long after the dryer stopped. It was as if life had slowed just enough for me to see it again. On Sunday afternoon, I was pruning the rose bushes in the garden when I heard the crunch of tires on the gravel driveway. I turned, brushing dirt from my gloves, and there he was again, Mark, standing by his car, waving a little, as if asking silently if it was okay to approach. I smiled. You're starting to make this a habit, I called out. Maybe, he said, walking toward me. But I come bearing coffee. He held up 2 cups, the steam curling in the cool air. I laughed and took one from him, the warmth seeping through my gloves. What brings you here today? I asked. He hesitated, glancing toward the garden. I was driving through town. Thought I'd stop by and see how the maple tree's doing. I followed his gaze to the old tree, its leaves beginning to turn amber. It's holding up, I said, like the rest of us. He smiled. Yeah, like the rest of us. We walked slowly along the garden path, sipping coffee, talking about small things, work, the weather, how fast the seasons seemed to change these days. But beneath the lightness there was a quiet understanding, the kind that doesn't need words to explain itself. After a while, we sat on the bench beneath the tree. The air smelled faintly of soil and fading blooms. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, watching the leaves fall. "You know," he said, "I think people underestimate the quiet moments, the ones that sneak up on you when nothing special is happening." I nodded. "They're the ones that stay with you the longest." He looked at me then, not with intensity, but with calm honesty. That day in the laundry room, it reminded me how it feels to actually connect with someone. I didn't realize how much I'd missed that. I took a slow breath, feeling the weight and gentleness of his words. "Me too," I said. "It's strange how a small moment can wake up parts of your life you thought were settled." He smiled softly. "Maybe that's what life is supposed to be. Little reminders that we're still here, still changing, even when we think we're done growing." I let the silence that followed linger. The sound of leaves rustling filled the space between us, and I thought about how far I'd come, not in miles, but in heart. I wasn't the woman in that photograph anymore, not entirely. But maybe that was okay. Maybe growing older wasn't about losing your past self, but carrying her gently into the next season. We talked until the light began to fade, our words growing quieter as dusk settled over the garden. When he finally stood to leave, he looked back once more and said, "Take care of yourself, Mrs. Carter." "Call me Ellen," I replied, smiling. He paused, nodded once, and smiled back. "See you soon, Ellen." When he drove away, I stood there for a moment, the last streaks of sunlight painting the sky in soft gold and pink. The garden was calm again, but it didn't feel empty. It felt alive. Every rustle, every shadow, every breath of air whispering something simple and beautiful, that it's never too late to rediscover yourself. That night, I sat by the window with a cup of tea. The photograph Mark had returned now framed beside me. The woman in the picture smiled back. Mid-laugh, unguarded, full of light. I realized I didn't miss her anymore. She was still here. Just quieter now. Wiser. Still capable of being surprised. And for the first time in years, I felt an unshakable peace. Not because someone had come into my life to fill an empty space, but because they'd reminded me that the space had never really been empty. I'd just forgotten how to see it. So, if you've listened this far, wherever you are, tell me, what's something small that's reminded you of yourself lately? I love hearing your stories. Maybe take a moment, leave a comment, tell me where you're watching from. We're all part of this strange, beautiful circle of rediscovery. And if this story touched you, even a little, make sure you subscribe so we can keep finding these quiet, unexpected moments together. Because life doesn't end when things get quiet. Sometimes that's when it finally begins.